So I was born into a family of an agnostic father who didn't believe in God and believed that when we got put in coffins, we rotted and worms ate us. And a mom who grew up nominally Catholic, but grew up under Mussolini and fascism in Italy, and so believed that most of what you were told about things was probably not really true. And so I remember when we went off to church school one time, she said, "Now don't let them brainwash you." And she said that a lot. Now, I didn't really understand why she would say that to us. But it was because she grew up under fascism. She grew up under all this misinformation campaigns to just get you to go along with things so that people could control you. And she didn't want that to happen to her kids. About the time I was about 2 years old, my grandfather, who I'm named after, Nicola, had a massive heart attack and died on the field. He was revived in the hospital. And he literally said to my mom, he said, "Listen, I've seen God, and I know you don't believe me, and I know that you can't believe me." Because my mom was an agnostic at the time already. And he said, "I want you to just do one thing. I want you to enroll my grandsons, my brother and I, in church school. Just let them go to church school." Right? That was back in the day when, on Wednesday afternoon, the fifth graders could walk over to the Catholic Church and have religious education. And so I got that education fairly young, even though clearly my parents weren't practicing it, But it made me kind of Christ-haunted. It familiarized me with the story of Jesus, and it familiarized me with the idea that there was a God and that there were moral truths in the universe, and so on. And it lay dormant for a while, and then by the time I was in 5th or 6th grade, girls were far more important than God. But what that led to was I heard about a Christian camp in which there were about 2 girls for every guy. And I was an abnormally small boy at that time, and I was having difficulty getting at the attention of females. And so that ratio really spoke to me. Plus, I was an outdoorsy kid. My dad liked to fish and hunt and camp and hike. And so I asked my parents if I could go. And my dad would have said no. But about 3 or 4 months before that, we had gone on a father-son canoe trip that a neighbor had dragged us into. And my dad loved canoeing. And so we had gone. And there was a family devotion you were supposed to do out of the Psalms. And my dad gave me a Gideon New Testament because it was the only Bible we had in the house. And he said, "Find Psalms and we'll talk about whatever this Bible passage is." So I went through the book, and I came back to my dad. I said, "Dad, there is no book in this whole Bible that starts with the letter S," right? And see, my dad grew up in church. He had just rejected the faith when he went to university. And so he didn't realize how biblically ignorant I was. He knew about the Bible, and he didn't realize his kid knew nothing about the Bible, right? So he told me, it starts with P. The Psalm starts with a silent P, and he helped me find the passage, and we did a little devotion. And it wasn't a very religious experience, but the guy who led the camp was on the canoe trip, and he was just a really godly, outdoorsy, down-to-earth, loving man. And my dad liked him and respected him immediately and respected his character. And so he thought, if this is a camp that guy leads, I can send my son. So I went, and I met a bunch of girls, and I heard the message of Jesus every night, over and over again. And the girls weren't particularly interested, but the gospel really did affect me. And what came home to me was not just that Jesus existed, that he died for my sins, but then in addition to that, I had to do something about it. I had to believe. And that Jesus wanted not just vague acceptance, but he wanted me to commit myself to him and really have the kind of faith that leans in the weight of trust and not just says, "I believe." And so for about 4 years, I went through this process. I really wanted to be in what the Bible calls the world. I wanted everybody to accept me. I wanted to get the things. I wanted success. I wanted affirmation. I wanted security, and I wanted comfort. I wanted everything the world had to offer, and I wanted to participate in it. And I knew that if I followed Jesus entirely, a lot of that was going to be rejected, and that was going to be very difficult for me. And so I kind of was on the fence. And frankly, it was torture to my conscience. It was just torture. I wanted to do what was right. I wanted to do what was good. I wanted to follow God, and I also wanted everything else. When I was about 14 years old, I was at that camp for the 4th time. And there was a pastor there, and I had all these objections. In fact, at that time, I was calling myself an atheist. And I sat down with him, and we talked about a lot of my objections. And he walked me through the book of Romans and the message in the book of Romans about how the gospel works. And he said, "Listen, you've got to choose whether or not you're going to believe." And then I came to Jesus that night in the most historically cliched way possible. Literally after a sermon, there was an altar call at a campfire, at a camp, where someone was playing Amazing Grace on a guitar. And I was invited to walk forward and go to someone who would lead me through the sinner's prayer, where I would say, "God, I believe in you. I've sinned. I accept Jesus as your son, as my Lord and Savior, and I commit my way to him throughout my life." So what? A lot of cliches are true. And so is this one. And so ever since, I've tried with lots of fits and starts to follow Jesus as entirely as I can. And that's the story of how I came to Jesus. Frankly, I think the walking with him is even better. After you come to Jesus, he forces you to find yourself, who you were really meant to be, right? And I had no idea who I was. And there's this passage in Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis where he says, salt just by itself is nothing, but when you add it to a food, it brings out the flavor that's already there, right? And what I found was that Jesus didn't want to make me into some kind of clone. He had given me a temperament and a history and a story and a family and all these different things. And I was too insecure, too bound up in myself, too afraid to take risks and to be who I was meant to be in the world. I didn't know what it meant to live in the image of God, fully and completely, with courage and with knowledge. And so from the moment Jesus came in and began to take control, he began not to make me less myself, but more myself. And that's gone through a lot of iterations over the course of my life, whether it was just learning how to obey and learning how to have any self-control over my life, learning to see the world as it really is, to see the truth rather than the illusions that I'd created for myself. And then later, overcoming certain kinds of insecurities and having the courage to step out. And now in these later years of my 40s, just figuring out wounds from my childhood that I never wanted to deal with, that he's forced me to deal with, but also has led me through a process of coming out of them and being changed and finally understanding what he's wanted me to be all along. And so every year, every step along the way has been another step, another movement closer to him, and in so doing, becoming more of the me that I was supposed to be. And it's been an incredible journey, and it's been really hard, and it has been something I would never give up.